Joining me now, retired U.S. Army officer and former diplomat, Joel Rayburn. Thanks for being with us today, Joel.
My pleasure.
Is this a win for Putin? I mean, Trump hasn't telegraphed necessarily that the sanctions will be lifted on Russia, but I think in the global community that is the expectation.
Well, Carolyn, so far, the step that the U.S. administration has taken is pretty limited. There was a license that was issued by the Treasury Department just a few days ago that pertained specifically to sanctioned Russian oil cargoes that were already loaded on ships, already on the water. And it authorized India to be able to purchase and offload those specific cargoes. Now, that could be, millions and millions of barrels, so that would increase the global energy supply. But so far, there's not an indication that the administration has in mind a blanket lifting of sanctions relating to Russia. So I don't think it's a win for Vladimir Putin at this stage.
Do you expect to see further sanctions lifted beyond this one? Will it be limited to India?
Well, I think the administration is going to want to keep as much leverage as it can in all the ongoing crises. So I don't think they're not going to move large scale on the lifting of sanctions to Russia if they can avoid it. And so that'll have to do with whether the U.S. military and its allies can be able to get an escort mission, can be able to secure the Strait of Hormuz for safe passage for commercial vessels. There are hundreds of commercial vessels, tankers bottled up in the Persian Gulf right now, and that's really what's the main factor that's affecting the global oil price.
You mentioned Hormuz. Trump has said a couple things about that strait. One, saying if we need to use naval escorts, we will. And also saying if Iran blocks the passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz, we will hit back 20 times harder than you've ever seen us strike before. What do you expect to happen next with respect to getting tankers through that strait?
I think probably what the president is inclined to do is to do that naval escort mission in the Strait of Hormuz, something similar to what President Reagan did back in 1987 and 88, in particular at the height of the tanker war during the Iran-Iraq war. And I think right now you can see the signs that the U.S. military is taking and its allies too, taking preparatory measures to try to clear the way for that kind of escort mission. They've been focusing on neutralizing or sinking as much of the Iranian Navy as possible, especially the Revolutionary Guards Navy, that's the force that's inside the Persian Gulf that would have the mission of trying to disrupt the Strait of Hormuz.
Joel, if I can, hard pivot just for a second. Is there any concern, do you think, in the global community who are watching conflicts around the world? And let me just say, this isn't the first time we've had two conflicts going at the same time. But because all eyes are focused right now on what's happening in Iran, that people are not thinking about what's happening with the war in Ukraine and that there could be consequences there as a result?
Well, I think certainly the European allies are always looking at Ukraine as their top priority. Regardless of what happens in the Middle East, of course, they're going to have to spend some bandwidth and attention on that, especially supporting some of the naval missions. And there are some European naval assets that would be very helpful in that regard. But I think the rest of NATO, minus the United States, is not going to shift its primary focus away from Ukraine. And on the battlefield, there's no sign that the Russian military is able to use distraction, if you will, to Iran as a cover to make any gains. In fact, the Ukraine has been making some local offensives lately that have been gaining some ground. Strategically speaking, too, I think it's if the Iranian regime collapses either militarily or just collapses outright and ceases to exist, that's a real strategic setback for Vladimir Putin because the Iranians have been such an important ally for him strategically, including in Ukraine.
Joel Rayburn, we appreciate your time and your thoughts very much.
My pleasure.
Retired U.S. Army officer and former diplomat, Joel Rayburn.